Hi, my dear friends from all over the world. Today we're here at Jesus College, Cambridge, and we're going to have an interview with Dr. Ash Soni, who traveled here from London to give a talk on entrepreneurship, medicine, and self-growth. Dr. Ash Soni is a renowned plastic surgeon who has clinics in both London and Ascot, featured in Forbes, Vogue, and Harper's Bazaar. I will pass the word to you.
Absolutely. Well, it's an honor to be here at the University of Cambridge today at Jesus College to actually give this talk. I am a US and UK trained plastic surgeon and I'm the founder and owner of the Soni Clinic, which is my private practice located in both London and Ascot. It's honestly an absolute privilege to be able to share my journey and my experiences. I trained in the US at Johns Hopkins, Cornell. I've been to Imperial College London med school and have trained at places like the Royal Marsden. So it's been really a real journey. And now obviously being in the world of private practice, I can now impart that on all of you.
My name is Violeta. On this channel, I interview professionals in various fields. I started it while studying at Cambridge and have hosted speaker events and personal interviews. Enjoy the video.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming. So we are here at the beautiful Jesus College at the University of Cambridge, and we are hosting Dr. Ash Soni, who is going to give us a talk about entrepreneurship, the transition from academia to starting your own business, and as well as personal growth. Thank you very much for coming. We're very happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, it's an absolute honor to be at the University of Cambridge. Last time I came here was when I was 21 years old to visit my friend who was studying here, so it's been a long time. So it's an honor to be back and speaking.
Can you imagine when Ash was 21, he came specifically to Jesus College out of all 31 colleges.
Yeah, that's true.
And then the talk is held here.
I know.
So Dr. Ash Soni is also featured in lots of prestigious publications such as Bazaar, Forbes, and Vogue. So please tell us how you got there. Give us a little bit of your background.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me today. So I'm a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. I trained in the US and the UK. I actually went to medical school at Imperial College in London, not too far from you guys. And really from that journey, grew up in Surrey in the south of England. And really from that time, from medical school in London, I was always looking to see what I could do that was slightly different and off the beaten path. And we'll go into a lot about my journey today. Just to give you an overview, so I trained, I went to medical school at Imperial College London for 6 years. I got a Bachelor of Sciences and obviously an MBBS at the end of that. I then went to America for 8 years and trained at Cornell in New York City, at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore doing general surgery there, and then the West Coast in Seattle to do plastic surgery. So it was a long journey with a lot of trials and tribulations over that time, as you can imagine, in America. And then I moved back to the UK, back to London in 2019, so not that long ago. I did a cancer reconstruction fellowship at the Royal Marsden Hospital in London. Some of you may know that. It's a very reputable hospital in Europe for cancer reconstruction and cancer in general. And then after doing that 2-year fellowship, I then ended up setting up my business, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I have a private practice called the Soni Clinic, which is located in London at the Langham Hotel and in Ascot in Berkshire. So that's kind of my overview.
When did you decide to start up your business? In the very beginning, you started as an academic.
Correct.
And did the US influence your decision?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think deep down, deep rooted in, especially medics in general, but I think a lot of us, we're institutionalized. Names, at least names matter to me, and probably for you all, because you're at University of Cambridge. And I think, there is an element of that education that was the most important part. And so I think I went into medicine with the premise of being some form of academic doctor. I didn't know what it was going to be at that time. I just knew I was interested in medicine. I think that was after some work experiences, and we're very young in the UK to make those decisions. We're making those decisions at 16, 17 years old. There's a lot of the US versus UK, and the way that undergrad is done out there is a very different system. We have to pick our specialties potentially quite early if we want to do a career or think that we want to do a career in law or medicine, and those kind of specialties. So I think I started in, going down that route of academia, obviously Imperial College was very academic, it was very research driven, and that sort of carried me through even through the US, because the US have a lot of money to pump into research. So I was training at a hospital like Johns Hopkins, for example, where the innovation and research is really the top of its game. And so I was publishing papers a lot of the time whilst doing clinical, surgical training job. And I think it's very interesting to make the switch then from being so deep rooted into academia to then going totally off the beaten path and setting up your own business, when I think, especially as medics, we're so it's very much like, what's the next step, and everyone has their life plan of, it's going to be training for medical school for this period of time, training for this period of time, and then you're going to be a consultant, and you may do a little bit of private on the side to earn a little bit of extra money, but it was never, it was always like everyone was always gearing up for the next few years, until I just decided that it was going to be, the transition point for me was really in COVID. Yeah, I mean, I thought about private practice being in America. I was lucky in America in plastic surgery training. We have 6 months over the last couple of years of actually rotating with private plastic surgeons. And I think also I was totally burnt out by the academic system. I was dealing with trauma in the middle of the night. I was working 115 hours every week for about 7 years. I used to do 72 to 100 hours straight of on-calls, dealing with face trauma, gunshot wounds, cancer trauma. There's a lot of different things that we were doing in the middle of the night, all night operating. And in America, the issue is that there's just no balance. There's no balance there's no personal life, there's no professional, it was just, you were always in the hospital. And so I think by the end, towards the last couple of years, and then getting a taste of what private practice would be, my mind started to wander slightly off the academic path, thinking that actually, quality of life could be better than what I'm in right now. And I think the other issue was that I was in an environment that was very toxic. The training system out there is very hierarchical, and those seniors truly beat down on you because they went through that, so they think it's okay for you to then go through that. So I was miserable, like truly miserable. I would never see my wife. I would hardly speak to my family because I was 8 hours time difference apart. It was a very tough time towards those last couple of years. And I think it really led me then to think of what the other options were. So that was when I first started to think about it. But obviously I got job offers all over the country in America for private practices, because the minute they know that you trained at some of these institutions, they're headhunting you from those last couple of years, because they want you to join their practice with amazing starting salaries and everything. But I was so burnt out by the whole system of the US that I booked a one-way ticket out of there. And came to London and took 5 months off with my son because he'd just been born, and I had a job lined up, and I was like, it was at a trauma hospital, and I was like, I need some time off, I need to figure out what I want to do here. And actually the Royal Marsden job was a really nice balance, because they don't have an A&E. So I wasn't dealing with trauma, I was just dealing with elective cancer reconstruction, and it gave me that time and that window to think, what am I going to do? And then COVID hit, and all the cancer surgeries that were non-urgent got cancelled. And so my life changed dramatically, because I was suddenly at home. And on a side note, I was shielding because I'm immunosuppressed, because I have Crohn's, which is an inflammatory bowel disease. So I'm immunosuppressed, so I was immediately shielding due to the government guidelines at that time. But actually, it was almost a blessing for me, because I had more time with my son, my wife, my family. And then also, I was able to figure out what a business plan even looked like. And that's how it all started.
And what were the first steps in your business plan?
I was really nervous because I don't have any business background. So a lot of you are, probably super smart, business-minded, maybe at business school, maybe doing different degrees. But for me, being medically trained, my whole life had been medicine from 17, 18. So I never had a background of learning other things. So I was quite nervous, if I'm being honest. And I sat down, or pen to paper, I guess, fingers to keyboard, and tried to figure out if I was going to pitch a proposal to a bank, for example. If I wanted a loan, I needed some form of business plan, at least just some ideas to jot down of what I thought I could do, the type of practice that I wanted to try and create, the type of brand that I wanted to try and create, and then how I was going to make it niche and different to what was out there on the market already. because I'm in aesthetics, and as you can imagine, aesthetics is a booming industry. Everyone is an aesthetic provider or an aesthetic practitioner. They're all doing injectables or whatever you want to see out there. And so I had to figure out how I was going to be different and how my practice was going to be different. So then I sat down and tried to work out some rough figures of what I thought the number of procedures I would maybe do on a conservative basis in the first year, how much revenue I generate given the amount of overheads that I potentially have, the amount of product I'd have to put into especially for injectables and things like that. And so it was very interesting because I basically had to then come up with what I thought was my 1 year or 2 year projection of what I thought my business was going to do when I had no business. I had no name. So I had to figure out and learn all these things of how to trademark a name, how to register a business, whether I was going to become VAT registered or not, or whether I was going to be a sole trader. I needed to have an accountant and I needed to have a legal team. And so all of these things I had to learn very fast. And I did a Dragon's Den situation with my family, which is the most nerve-wracking I've been in front of my parents, because I set up a Zoom call with them, because we were all in different houses during COVID, right? And I set up a Zoom call with them and basically did I wanted to pitch them my business. I wanted to pitch them what I thought I could do. And I remember my family were very supportive, but I think when I pitched them this plan, there was a small element where I think they thought it was a gross overestimation of what made me possible. But I truly believed it, and I thought, I know this world. I know, I'd studied a few different private practices, and so the business model for me was really just putting my ideas down on paper in as comprehensive a way as I could have done.
That's quite impressive. So you didn't really use any consultant agencies in order to set up your own business. You learned yourself. Did you read lots of books on it, or how did you come up with the whole business model?
Yeah, it's good. I didn't read books on a specific kind of business model, but I definitely did my research. Obviously on the internet as much as I could do. I was trying to look up what business plans even look like. My family had been in business in a different way, not in medicine, more in retail a long while back. And so my dad's, savvy in a way, but I think it was very different because I was setting something up that was totally different to what I'd ever seen or grown up around. None of my immediate family are doctors, at least not my parents. And so it was something that was totally novel. So I guess I did as much research as I could of what business plans even look like. I had no idea. So I just, got, like I said, I put as comprehensive and as detailed as I possibly could. And I did review this business plan 2 years into my business, and I found it hilarious. But also, it was incredible to look at it because I was like, wow, actually, I crushed that all out of the water, and we'll probably talk about that. But it was more what I thought was, oh my goodness, if I could do this, it would mean that I'm maybe successful, or getting towards whatever the term success is. It was amazing to look at it back. So I'm glad I did it, more for looking back on it, to see what I thought I wanted to get out of it, or what I wanted my business to look like.
And you got a lot of success in it. So you, with all this knowledge, with starting it, I think it's really relatable to the audience. So imagine maybe reflecting back, and maybe imagine a hypothetical situation that a student has just graduated and has a certain area of expertise. What would be the first thing that you would recommend a student to think about?
Yeah, number one, obviously the most simple thing is that you just have to have an idea, and you have to have an idea that is somewhat different to what's out there. Because I think and I don't think you should let medicine and surgery get in the way of this conversation, because this is applicable to anyone who sets up any business. It is not specific to a private practice, but I can share from my perspective, we're all nervous. No matter what stage you're at in your career. I was a consultant plastic surgeon, I was still nervous to do this because it's something different. Now, we can keep searching, and I think a lot of my friends, even still to this day, they kept doing degrees and they kept trying to find ways in which to delay the jump, the leap. But I think at some point you've got to just take the jump, and you've got to trust your own instincts and trust your own abilities. But you've got to do the research behind it as well. So having an idea is great, but you have to do the research and understand what totally exhausts the market and where you want to be, what location maybe, or the demographic and who you're trying to cater to. You can't cater to everybody, and I think you've got to figure out within that the idea that you may have, how are you going to be, so how are you going to stand out? And like I was saying to you all, being in aesthetics, which is so saturated, how was I going to stand out? And I had to create my own niche, and I do. I haven't set up a conventional practice, so the plastic surgeons in my position have not done what I did in any way, actually, a lot of the time, because number one, I set up a clinic with no name. I didn't join another group, and we'll get onto that about whether or not you need experience of working for others and things, but I went out totally independent from my academic job. So I did a big jump of going from an academic hospital, which was security. I had a salary, you know, I was safe, it was comfortable, you have a blanket around you because you know you're protected. But then you have to take a leap of faith, and I went in, my contract in the NHS, just to kind of give this backstory, was ending in April 2021, which is not that long ago, by the way, as you know. And I had to decide whether I was going to extend that for the security and the safety and that beautiful cozy blanket around me, or whether I was just going to go in 120% and try and make this work. And I tested the waters. So I set up, I rented a cheaper room down in Surrey, and I did this on weekends where I wasn't on call to just test the waters, just to see whether or not I thought my idea could work. And the minute but you're still nervous because there was so many lockdowns at that time. I was closed more than I was open, so I couldn't really test. I couldn't walk, get to know people without wearing a mask. It was very different. And so I think I had to just take a leap of faith. So I went into 120%. I dove head first, no name, no one knew who I was. And I set up in the suburbs, and that was by design. But again, I think I set up a business where I'm a plastic surgeon. Yes, I still do surgery, but I do a lot of aesthetic, injectable, non-surgical work. And being a plastic surgeon doing that is actually a novelty in this country. And I think you have to find some way of doing it that's somewhat novel, and that will give you the quality of life that you want. But I think you've just got to take a leap of faith. So yes, an idea, but you've got to at some point commit. And that's the scary part, we're all nervous. I had 2 really young kids then, and my wife was on maternity leave, and I knew that if I didn't get any patients in through the door, I would make no money. And that's a very terrifying prospect. But at the same time, like I said, sometimes it's high risk, high reward. And I believed in the idea, and I thought if I go for this, and it works, it could pay off massively. And we can talk about how it started in the first couple of months, but I think that's the biggest thing, is don't let the fear stop you.
So you trusted your intuition?
I did, but I didn't have to, right? Because we've all got to this point. You're all here for a reason. And and I think it was that, I think somebody asked me a question earlier, how it felt to be up here at the University of Cambridge speaking. And even being at medical school at Imperial, I've given so many talks now, and you never imagine it, but I think you just have to trust that you know your stuff, and you've got here for a reason, but why can't you get there? I mean, people could look at me and be like, well, he doesn't have an MBA, he doesn't have a business degree, but that doesn't stop me from giving talks on business or entrepreneurship, because it's not about necessarily just the degree. Of course it can help, but it's more about what have you done, or what have you created for yourself, or for a team, or for your business partners, or whatever entity you're in, and what have you got to show for it, and what is your story, and this is, so I think you've got to trust your intuition.
I'm thinking how to overlay your experience on a recent graduate. So, for example, a recent graduate has a business idea, and the first step would be to have that idea. Then there are 2 different paths, either to work for someone and to get some skills, or to jump right away.
Yeah.
Let's say a student follows the more secure path and gets a stable job, and then your recommendation would be to just test the water. What kind of, so in order to make the leap, what kind of knowledge do you think a person has to get before starting the business? So you mentioned the research, and I presume that it involves a lot of red tape. So what do you think are the key things that a person should research?
I think you've got to be comfortable in the industry that you're in. So if you feel like you need work experience in order to set up a business within that field or the field that you do, then I would definitely get experience. For me, from a procedural standpoint, it was slightly easier, right? Because I'd already become a consultant, so the procedures wasn't the bit that I was nervous about. It was actually the business side of it. And I think you've got to understand the industry and the market that you're in. And if you do, and if you have a good understanding, even coming out of academics, and you think, you know what, I've got an idea and I don't necessarily need to work for another company, whether it's a consulting company or a company within that world, if you think it will give you an edge, then there's no reason not to do an experience for that. And I think I took an experience where I just did a few rotations around different private practices in London, and it was just to observe how it was being run and try and understand the economics of how it was being run and how I would do it differently. And I think, so I did it for maybe 6 months where I was operating with a surgeon. I'd say, hey, can I just hang out for a bit? But actually what I was doing was studying the business model behind this and understanding how the surgeons get reimbursed, how the facility gets reimbursed, who takes what out of this, and how I would do it differently, or better, in my opinion. And so it actually shaped that experience. Those experiences did shape how I set up a practice, because I had to understand the way the UK system was, because I trained in America where the private system is totally different. So you've got to understand your market. So I think if you need to get experience, you should do. But if you have an idea and you don't think necessarily working for a consulting company for 3 years is going to give you that edge, then I would say take the leap. And as long as you have a solid plan and you have the backing, whether it's self-funded or not, and know you're going to be okay, then I'd say that's worth it.
And running a business also involves knowledge in accounting and marketing. So did you delegate it to a team? If so, how did you form your team, and your recommendations on all three of these aspects?
Yeah, I think as a new business, you have to be really careful about how you spend money. Because a lot of my colleagues in the industry and different businesses that I've seen in different industries, people make the mistake of putting too much in at the beginning, and then you have to know that it's actually your company's gonna turn over and you're actually gonna make money, right? So people spend it very quickly. But the way I set up a business was to spend as little as possible. So I truly minimized my overheads. So the only people I employed at the beginning was an accounting firm, and I had a couple of lawyers who would help me with the legalities of my company, my consent forms, my structure. But I kept it very, very contained within those walls, because those are subspecialty things that, unless you have a lot of training in or a lot of background in, that for me wasn't something that I am an expert in. So I needed a good accountant. But you still have to learn accounting yourself. I still do all of my finance at the end of every quarter. I know every single transaction that's made in my clinic. I log it personally in an Excel sheet. I know I audit my own data. I know what the growth is month to month. I still do all of my VAT tax returns, but I send it to an accountant who then does all of the other stuff. But I still have to know every single element of my business now. I did all my own marketing. I still do my own social media. Everything you see on Instagram is totally organic. It comes from me. It does not come from somebody else, because I wanted to. At the beginning, I did it more to minimize overheads, but then what I realized was it made it more organic and more approachable, and people got to know me, not somebody behind me. And so you've got to figure out within your respective business. Obviously, that's not possible for every business. Some people do need marketing. Some people do need a social media manager. But for me to put salaries out and retainers out to all of these different elements wasn't a possibility. I just didn't have that kind of funding, and I'm totally self-funded. I still am to this day. I've never taken a pound, never taken a loan from a bank. I've never taken funding. I don't have VC money. It is totally self-funded. And bear in mind, I was on an NHS salary. So you can imagine the amount I could save wasn't extensive. But I was smart about how I did it, and I worked like crazy. I did everything myself, basically. And I worked 7 days a week, constantly. We'll talk about the routine. But that's how I did it at the beginning, because I minimized overheads and maximized profits. And within 6 months, I was able to build a completely bespoke 2-floor clinic in Ascot, which I invested in the property and redid the whole thing. But that can take 10 years for colleagues of mine in the industry to set up their own premises, to have their own team. But it's because I worked, and yes, it was busy, but I saved and I minimized overheads. I didn't pay any salaries. I did everything myself. And that's the truth. But I haven't talked about that really until now. Because people think I had a big team. I didn't have anybody. I did all the patient bookings myself, I did all the coordination, I did all my marketing, all my social media, but that's the reality and the hustle behind the lens. Everyone sees whatever they want to see through Instagram and social media and everything. But the reality behind it is so different. I was on my laptop with my kid, I put my kids to bed, I'd be on my laptop till 1 a.m, I'd wake up the next morning at 5, I'd be back, I'd be doing this every single day, 7 days a week. And yes, that's not sustainable. And I'm not advocating lack of mindfulness and mental health and everything else, but it's the realities of a business owner at the beginning. So that's how I did it.
So with the accounting side and marketing, you were learning by doing.
I was learning by doing. And you take advice. I'd ask my accountant if I had any questions.
Mm-hmm.
My dad's a chartered accountant too, so I'd curbside questions to him if I wasn't sure about something. But you pick it up pretty quick, and you pick it up on the job. You don't need to be an accountant to pick it up. You've just got to understand numbers somewhat. But if I can do it, all of you guys can do it.
You mentioned that you self-funded your business, and any tips on how to find money to start the business? And were you considering reaching out to the potential investors?
Yeah, I didn't at the time, but I know a lot of people do. There are some clinics who've scaled very quickly, and some businesses, as we all know, in different industries that scale very quickly. You can get angel investors, you can get VC money. I think you've got to figure out. I wanted 100% ownership of my business. I didn't want to dilute my equity, and you all know, a lot of nodding heads right now. You know that if you set up a business and you start diluting the pool and taking a ton of investment, your equity within that company is going to dilute gradually. And it just depends on what your priorities are. If you want to go global, you want to scale quickly, yes, you would have to take funding. But for me, the way I wanted to structure it was I wanted to grow it organically and self-fund it as much as I possibly could. And I thought one day that if I need to take a loan or I need to take angel investing or whatever I need, the option could be there. But actually you make a better case for investing if you can show profitability of a business, right? If you go in there with just an idea, somebody's got to believe in that idea, and then you probably won't be able to take much equity out of that for yourself. But I think for me, I just wanted a different structure. It wasn't about scalability very fast, and it still isn't by choice.
Again, overlaying your experience on a potential student who starts the business. And let's imagine that a student has already taken the leap and has taken the risk. So in the very beginning, you had an accountant and a lawyer, and just yourself working a lot on the business. What were the other challenges that you faced, and what would be your recommendations how to face them?
I mean, there are so many challenges when you set up a business. I think the challenges, there's a lot of unknown, right? There's a lot of, you can't predict, there's no predictability. And the beauty of academics is that it's a safe environment where we have that blanket, we're super, yes, you've got to perform, but in this realm, there's a lot of element of risk taking, and you've got to figure out what's worth taking. I think for me personally, from speaking from personal experience, as my ideas started to work, I gained confidence. And with confidence, I was then able to take more risks, because every idea I put my mind to, touch wood, it worked. And pretty much, right? Obviously, there are going to be things that don't necessarily work as well as you think they're going to work. But I didn't do something which lost me money. Some things made more money than others, and some ideas worked more than others. And so for me, the way I looked at it and approached it was that I started to build confidence gradually. Because you feel an element of am I good enough? Am I capable of this? Is this going to work? If it doesn't work, what am I going to do? Don't think about it. There are fallbacks for us all. Have a plan B. My plan B was to go back to the NHS if really things didn't work out. I mean, I'm a long way past that now, right? But 3.5 years past it, which isn't that long in time, but from a business perspective, I'm way past that, and that gratefully is not my calling now. But I think you've got to just gain that confidence at some point, and you've got to stop feeling like an imposter, and you've got to then channel that confidence into believing in your ideas and believing that they will work. And I can tell you that really helped me a lot.
Was it the thing that helped you to be consistent? also, because I think
Correct.
consistency is the key to everything, and the belief in your idea, in your business.
100%. I mean, you've got to have the belief and you've got to be consistent. I mean, I think it's hard in environments where you don't have control over, but when you are in control, you can either be one of two people. You can be the person who's like, I'm in control, I have my own business, I can take a day off here, I can take a day off there, I can do this, that, and the other. But at the beginning, there is no option if you want to thrive. And so for me, the idea of, even now, year to year, the idea of plateauing is not like an option for me. Like the idea of plateauing is not comfortable for me. I want to be continually growing in some way. I want to be continually evolving, and we all need to do that. And I think consistency is absolute key to productivity. And we're probably going to mention about habits and habit forming and the way I structure my typical routine, but I think you've got to be consistent at anything you give it, because you can't be taking days off here and there all the time. You've got to really commit, and when you commit to it, you've got to give it everything you have to make this work. And then when it works, you can take a day. Like then it's fine. You've got my quality of life is massively improved this year, actually, which is just started my 4th year, and I finally started to get the balance that I want, which took me a bit of time, but you've got to get to that point, right? I mean, the first couple of years are pretty rough going sometimes in terms of the amount of time and energy you have to invest in it.
I'm also thinking that sometimes when you start a business, lots of people have this "what if I fail" in their mind. And now reflecting back, did you have lots of failures? Because I think we learn, like the more mistakes we make, the more experience we get. So what helped you to go through these failures, and what kept you going, and were they actually the failures now reflecting back?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that definitely there are things I could have done better from a personal perspective, actually, more so than a professional. Things now, and you had Mimi on here like a while ago, some of you may have seen Mimi Icon. So mindfulness is something, and mental wellness is something that I never grew up talking about. No one spoke about, no one talked about it in med school, no one talked about it in surgical training, no one cared how you felt. You just had to show up, and you had to be 120% every day. I think something I wish I'd done from an earlier perspective, especially when I was studying and training especially, was focus on mental well-being. And I don't think I did that very well. And actually that was a hindrance to me while I was training, and I think when I came out of it, it added to the burnout, the exhaustion, the mental fatigue, and not really knowing and losing sight of where I wanted to go. And I made a lot of changes in my life in the last 4 years, and I owe a lot of my success and productivity to a particular pivot point where I realized there was a lot of mental stuff I was processing from America. We don't need to get into that today necessarily, but there was a lot of trauma, burnout, a lot of things that you see. You're proclaiming people dead at 2 a.m. and you're back in the next day, and babies are dying in front of you, and there's a lot of crazy stuff that you see, and you don't process any of that when you're going through it. You might deal with toxic, people in a work environment, whatever it may be. And I think I never let myself process the reality of it. I sort of powered through robotically. So the biggest thing in terms of from a failure perspective was failing to recognize that I need to take care of myself mentally. And I saw a therapist, I gave up drinking for life, I did all of these things within a 2-month period. And it really changed the way the course of my life has been over the last 4 years. So actually, it's one of the things to take away from today, I think, more so than even the business strategy. You've got to be the best version of yourself and feel the best version of yourself to be the best. And people can feel it when they come to my clinic. They can feel my positivity, they can feel my energy, they can tell that I really love what I do. And I think, but you have to make sure that you are the best possible version of yourself you can be in order to make any of this work. And I can tell you that I owe everything that I've achieved to those changes that I made. And it was a particular point during COVID that I realized I have to make some changes here. And that led me down. So they're not specific failures, but it was something that I failed to recognize.
And how did you deal with the burnouts? Was it the mindfulness practices?
It was like mindfulness, I think seeing a therapist, they all helped process a lot of the things that I was feeling at the time. I took a little time out, those 4 or 5 months that I was telling you guys earlier about, where I could spend a bit of time with my son at that time. There were things that I needed to reflect on, and I think can grow from. And remember that any hurdles, and we've all faced hurdles, we've all faced challenges, whether it's someone you know got sick, family members you've had to take care of, your own personal problems, your own personal health problems. We've all gone through stuff. But the one thing that you've got to take away from it is you can either crumble or you can use it to become more resilient. And for me, I use all of these things to propel myself rather than crumble down. And you've got to figure out how you're going to process that. But you need help. And you need people to talk to sometimes, and the support. So don't forget that in the journey of all of this.
And what about your habits? So you mentioned it before that you have a specific routine every day. Could you elaborate on it?
Yeah, so this actually came about 3 years ago, where I read the 5 a.m. Club. I'm sure a lot of you have read Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. Club. So that was a book that I read, which essentially the premise is that if you wake up at 5, there's a certain thing that he goes through, the theory and philosophy that he goes through in the book that will make you a more productive person. So I read this book and I was like, wow, this is super cool. I don't actually mind waking up early. Let's try it. It was the peak of winter, dead of winter in England that you know, pitch dark outside. And I set myself the challenge of waking up every single day at 10 to 5, every single day, no matter whether I felt sick, whether it was terrible weather, you could hear the wind and the rain against the window. And in this book as well, he talks about exercising within the first 20 minutes, right? So the first 20 minutes a day, you're supposed to have your gym kit by your bed, your trainers by your bed, and you're ready to go. You brush your teeth or whatever, and you get out the door. So I did this in the dead of winter. So it was like, minus whatever outside. It was pitch black, and I would just start running down the street. It felt a bit weird the first day, I gotta be honest. And I live in the countryside, so it's even more terrifying at night in the black. But I did it anyway, and I got out there every single day. And by day 20, I formed the habit. So my body was already automatically waking me up at 4:45 before my alarm went off. And for me, the way I've always seen things is I like to be ultra productive, and I've got 2 young kids, right, and a wife. So I'm very busy in general, and we'll talk about balance, because that'll come under balance, I guess, in terms of how I balance my life and how I balance my family with work and my gym and everything else. So my typical day is wake up at 10 to 5, 3 mornings a week I'll take my kids to school, the other couple of mornings I will go to the gym, and so I'll be in the gym by around 5:30, 5:40. I work out for an hour, and then I've already accomplished, and I've gone through emails. I've already planned for the day, and it's already, it's before most of the country is woken up. And I think that for me gives me a lot of satisfaction. And if you read a lot of books on entrepreneurship and motivation and people who are successful, you'll realize that there's some overlapping traits, which is waking up super early, getting half your day done before the rest of the world wakes up. That for me has been super crucial, especially with having kids. So I'm a very early riser. And there are a lot of days where I'm on my laptop until late at night. But I don't watch TV, very minimal TV, because I don't have time for it. So I'd rather just eat and then get on my laptop and work when my kids are sleeping. So there's a lot of my day that's scheduled around my children, and a lot of my professional goals, I guess. There are opportunities that I won't always take up, because I need to make sure I can still strike a balance of being a present dad in the midst of running a crazy busy business. But I'm very disciplined about my routine. So 6 days out of 7, I'm up before 5, and then one day my lie-in is about 6 a.m. That's probably my lie-in. And it's hard sometimes to do that in academics, especially when you've got tests and exams and things. You've got to be mentally ready. When you're working, it's a little bit easier, because I don't feel like I don't have to read as much material as some of you who are doing a dissertation or whatever you're doing. It's a different type of mental focus. But I think the routine for me has been crucial, again, in outperforming others in the industry. And I work every Sunday, or at least 3 Sundays a month. I'm working tomorrow. And that was, again, a strategic business decision to open my clinic on Sunday, where most clinics are shut. So people are off, people have free time, they can go to see a surgeon and get their injectables done or whatever they want to do. And so Sunday for me is my busiest day, and it's always been my highest revenue day out of all the days I do, Monday to Sunday, because no one else is open, and I'm open for 12, 13 hours straight that I'll do tomorrow in London. And it's a productive day, and yes, I could be with my kids, and yes, but you've got to find times in the week that you can compensate for that. but you've got to make certain business decisions that again are slightly maybe different to others, but something that others are not doing.
And you have a big team now?
I don't have a big team. I have a small team, but it's by design. So I have a couple of assistants who are front of house, they act as my patient coordinators, and then me. So actually I have a very small team. I know I have an exact model of how I would scale this, but you've got to remember that if you scale a business and you run and you manage more people and you have more personalities in the mix, it adds a lot of stress to your plate as a business owner, and especially if you want control over your business within those early years, the bigger the team, the more the stress. And so for me, by design, I've created a business that is right now very easy to manage for myself. It's not stressful. Yes, there are ways I could make additional revenue. I could hire other doctors in. I could get other providers into my clinic. I could have a massive team. I could go global. I had an opportunity to set up a clinic in Dubai this year. I turned it down because it wasn't the right time for me to do this. And there's going to be a time where I can scale internationally and do that. But I run 2 clinics in the UK, and I'm working already 5.5 clinic days a week and 1 admin day a week, and then 1 day off with my kids. So it doesn't need a lot of time to then try and think about international ventures, managing a huge team. From a revenue perspective, like I'm growing at least at a rate of 110 to 120% a year right now. So I'm super happy with the way that things are going. My 10-year projections are have been, I managed to accomplish them pretty much in 2 years, the first 2 years of business. So I'm very grateful for that. I don't take any of it for granted. I work as hard as I did on day one, because you can't take for granted that you can now be comfortable and you can take your foot off the gas. It just doesn't work like that. You've got to keep going and keep the momentum, keep the consistency, which is why I still work the way I do. But the idea of scalability right now is not in my cards, but it will eventually, of course, happen when my kids grow up a little bit and I'm ready for that next chapter. But then I'll be in a position where I don't need VC backing, because I'll have the funds from my business that I can scale it without needing additional money put in. And a lot of the other businesses within will take, and like we talked about earlier, it'll dilute the equity that they have. And people scale to sell often. And right now I can do that, but I'm not ready for it yet. I'm just enjoying the growth.
How do you motivate your team?
How do I motivate my team? Financially, number one, I think people have got to be paid well, so you've got to reimburse people appropriately. Christmas bonuses are always a good one too. But I think overall, beyond the financial conversation, you've just got to be a good human. I think that applies to anything. You've got to be a good person. You've got to treat people with respect. You've got to understand that they have a life too. They don't necessarily have the same passion for your business that you might do, but you have to instill that passion. With my team, they know how much I love what I do. They know I'll do anything for my patients. I will go out of hours, I will talk to them if they need. They have my email. Most of my patients are so comfortable that they'll send me messages on Instagram, they'll DM me whatever, they'll send me how they looked at a party or whatever it may be. But you've got to create a level of trust and respect, and it's a really beautiful thing, because if people are happy working under you, they will outperform. They will go above and beyond, and they will create a service that you are proud of. And I was very clear about how I ran my business. Patients need to be checked in regularly. We need to make sure they don't feel like they're alone. And whether you're selling a product and you have customers, you have to make sure that people have the same experience, right? The quality needs to be the same, consistent. You need to make sure that people come away feeling like that was an amazing experience, and they talk about it and they tell their friends and they shout about it from the rooftops. And that's the beauty of how businesses will continue to thrive. So the way that I run my team is literally just with respect, trust. Of course you set the expectations, but you have to make sure that they feel respected, and that is the biggest thing I can say.
And when you hire people, what are the key skills that you're looking for?
So obviously they need the experience, right? They need the experience to be able to run a business successfully. However, most important, they need to be really good people. They need to seem caring, at least and if they prove you wrong, that's a different matter. And I think really deep down, like their personality and the way that they interact with, I don't like too much chatty, I don't like too chatty, but there's a level of charismatic and have a personality versus too much. And I think you've got to find the right balance. There were a couple of people that I hired at the beginning that just didn't work out, that weren't the right fit. And I think you've got to make sure that I just don't like drama. I don't like tension. I like people who are just, it's hard to find. And it's hard to find people with the right work ethic, because I work all the time, and you expect that people are going to have, they can't always have the same work ethic as you, but you need to make sure that they are incentivized to work harder than the norm. And I think it's hard in this generation because people don't want to work out of hours. It's a very clock in, clock out system now. You can't get people who are younger to want to work hard because they don't want to. They'll just be like, I'd rather not. And even if you incentivize them financially, like, you know what, I'd rather go to the bar with my friends and hang out. So it's very difficult. I hired my main, she does everything for me. You know, she's 65, but she's got a work ethic like no other. And I incentivize her. I'll do everything to keep her, and she knows that. But it's hard. You need to find people who have the right work ethic, and that is very difficult to find in today's world. And so that's the one thing that you need to try and if you find somebody, you've got to hold on to them, and you've got to incentivize them however it is to keep working for you.
What are your priorities now?
Priorities regarding?
Regarding everything, regarding your business and life. Because now you have already come to the point where you already run 2 clinics. And you mentioned that you were thinking about expanding it globally as well. But right now, what are the priorities?
So my priorities from a work perspective are to continually grow at the rate that we're growing. I think, listen, it's very easy there's no targets that are set on me. No one can set me targets except myself. So you have to set yourself arbitrary targets to keep yourself motivated, right? So I have to set myself targets. The target in my number of what the revenue should be this year is arbitrary. No one can monitor that, right? It doesn't make any difference to anyone except it does to me. But I have targets, and I work super hard towards that. And of course, it's not just about money, it's about delivering a good product. And I think if you deliver a good product, you enjoy what you do, you're passionate about what you do, the success and the financial rewards will come. They will come automatically. So I set myself targets. I think my priorities is number 1, setting myself ambitious targets that I know that are not necessarily causing me a severe amount of stress to meet them, because again, they are arbitrary, but I want to make sure that we're continually growing. I think you've got to make sure you strike a good balance in your life between your loved ones, your family, if you've got a partner, if you have children. That for me is my biggest priority, and that actually adds a challenge every week, because I pass up opportunities sometimes that some would take if they didn't have children necessarily, right? But for me, it's about how can I work really hard but really efficiently and really productively, but also maintain being a good husband, being a good father, or not good, as great as I can be. And I think that's the challenge for me every week. And sometimes you think, oh, if I didn't have kids, I would have taken this opportunity, but it's not my reality. My reality is, and that's why when we talk about scalability, the revenue benefit that I would get from it would be outweighed by the stress. And I don't want to be in that position right now. So my priorities are my kids and my wife, obviously, and then, you know, being, and continually thriving and growing this. Like, this year for me was about consolidation. I set up a new clinic at the Langham Hotel in London. It was a completely novel thing. There's only 3 hotels in the city that are doing injectables within it, and we're one of them. And for me, that was a huge thing to grow and consolidate. And it was a big ask. You're asking a traditional London hotel to get somebody to inject Botox, collagen stimulated injectables, whatever it may be, into people in their hotels. It was a big ask, and I'm really happy it materialized because it's nearly been a year now. And it just creates a different experience for people, and I've not just tried to create a business, I've tried to create a brand. And I think that would apply to any of you out there if you're trying to set something up. You can't just create a clinic, you have to create a name for yourself, a brand, and how are you going to get there? I don't have PR, again, kind of going back to like what you asked me before about how many people, but gratefully I'm in the media every week, whether it's Harper's Bazaar, whether it's Vogue, whether it's Tatler, whether it's Telegraph, and it's building relationships. I didn't need PR because I just built relationships with people, they trust me, and most of these directors in the country trust me with their own face, which helps because then they write about me and they interview me for pieces. But it's about gaining trust. So you don't always need to outsource everything. You've just got to hone in and build beautiful relationships and be a good person.
So how to brand the brand?
That's hard. You need to have a good, a name to start with. You need to have You could get a designer in. I got a designer, part-time to kind of help me with my logo at the time and to help me with some of my graphics. But I think especially for social media, but I think you've got to understand, again, that comes down to that creating a niche. You've got to create something different. Why would somebody come to you over somebody else? Why? You have to figure out what's going to make you different, what's going to attract you, and how your website looks, how your social media grid is laid out. Everything's thought out. I didn't just randomly do it. Everything I thought of how I wanted things to be laid. I thought of how I wanted my landing page to be on my website. I came up with that. I created every detail that you can't. If any of you ever come to my Ascot clinic, if you're ever in Ascot, I'd love to welcome you in. But every detail from the door handles to the skirting boards to every single thing I picked, because I wanted people to get my aesthetic, not an interior designer's perspective or aesthetic. I wanted them to feel who I was. And so, especially in my industry, so you've got to take control rather than outsource everything always. Because everyone's like, oh, I'll just get an interior designer, they did my clinic, they're so good. I'm like, that doesn't represent me, it doesn't reflect me. And when people come in, I want my patients to get a sense of who I am, from whatever. So I think the brand is so important. You've got to figure out all the details.
You are having so many things at once. How do you prevent other burnouts? You mentioned that you were going through lots of burnouts before, but now?
You've got to keep reflecting in your daily life of, is this going down the direction you want, and are you overly stressed? Are you overly burdened? Are you spending so much time consumed by this? Yes, the first year and a half, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of energy and a lot of time, and I overwork myself for sure. I have some weeks that I do too. This week is a great example. I took a holiday last week, and it was great, but then on either side of that holiday, I have to pay for that. I have to pay the price of taking time off. So I know going into a holiday that before and after that holiday is going to be pretty brutal. So I think, but this year for me, I've got better balance even though I'm getting busier. And I think it gets easier as the financial stress gets taken off your shoulders slightly. I've been able to go on more holidays this year, which has been awesome. I've traveled more with my kids and my wife. It's been great. It's been a better year for me. I go to the gym more. I try not to feel guilty about not spending, if I should be spending time on something else, or spending time with my kids. I do it when they're asleep, mostly because it makes me feel less guilty. But you've got to find something that works for you. But keep reflecting on that through the journey. Don't always remind yourself of, is this the balance I want to create? And what are you doing it for? Sometimes, like for the Dubai clinic this year, it was all locked in. I had everything to go, and it would have sounded amazing. And this is the first time I'm talking about it openly. But I could have posted this huge post. It was going to be in this most stunning hotel in Dubai. And I could be like, but I kept reflecting. I was like, what am I doing this for? Am I doing it because I really want to do it, or am I doing it because of ego? Am I doing it to say I can do it? And I realized it's like, why stretch yourself so thin, for just the sake of maybe your ego getting in the way of something. So think about why you're doing things, and every decision you make, am I doing this for the right reason, or am I doing it because I can say I can do it? Think of that, because for me, that's actually allowed me to say no to things. And previously I would have just said yes to everything, but like, I'm going to do everything, and I'm going to work 1 million hours a week, and I'm just going to crush it, left, right, and centre. But yes, do well, evolve, grow, but rein it in sometimes. And that's why I'm happy to say the idea of scaling right now internationally is just not what I want at this moment in time. Will it happen? Of course it will. Of course, I'm US trained, I can go to New York, I can open up in Dubai, I can open up wherever I want. But I think you've got to rein it in sometimes and think, why am I doing something? Am I still able to maintain the balance? Because remember, burnout is real, and I've been through it once, and I don't want to go through it again. It is real, and I have to keep that in the back of my mind. You just remind yourself of how you felt during that time, and I don't want that to happen again. So that shapes a lot of the way I think.
I'll ask you a couple of last questions, and then I will ask some other questions from the audience. And one of the questions is, when you take a day off, do you completely detach from work, or do you think about it?
I think being a business owner, if any of you are a business owner in this room here, you know that a day off is never really a day off. It can't be. I wish I could say it is. It isn't. Of course, I'm on my email sometimes. I try and be the best I can be around my kids. So I try and put my phone away when I'm with them, but sometimes it's not always easy. You have to be available and you have to be on top of things. I'll give you an example. I was in Dubai last week. I have family out there, so it was lovely. I went to visit them, beautiful weather. But the first 3 days I was consumed mentally by work because, like I said, things pile on before you go on holiday. So it was still dripping into the first 2-3 days. And I was stressing myself out because because I really wanted to relax so much. I was stressing myself that I wanted to relax. And I was like, you know what? I've just got to some things you've got to let go, right? And so by day 3, I finally let go, and the last 3 days were bliss. But it's sometimes difficult, and don't put so much pressure on yourself that, like I did, like I've got to get a massage and go to a spa and I'm going to feel relaxed immediately. It just doesn't work like that. But I would say, take a step back sometimes, try and detach yourself as much as you possibly can. It is difficult. We've all got social media platforms, we've all got emails, we've got messages. My team are messaging me because they know I'm very involved and they know I want to know, every little detail that's going on. But sometimes you have to take a step back. For example, today, I didn't want to be disrupted before I came here. I wanted to be in a peaceful frame of mind coming into this talk. So I told my assistant, if there's anything urgent, you let me know. But if there's not, just hold it for 3 hours. And she knows that. And so I think your team have got to understand you too. But I'm trying to be better. It's a work in progress for us all. But I can never say it's a true day off because it just doesn't really work like that.
If you had a chance, what would you tell to your younger self?
Okay, that's a great question. I would say, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. I had so much doubt thrown my way over the years. People told me I couldn't get into Imperial College Med School. I had people tell me I couldn't get into surgical training in America. I ended up getting into the #1 hospital in the world at Johns Hopkins for surgery. And for me, those moments you'll never forget, right? Because there's so much in the doubt that people throw your way over life and make you feel like you're not necessarily good enough. And every single time I had a win, I had to remember that. But it took me longer and later in life to realize that my self-worth. And I think we all struggle with that sometimes. Most of you are probably, I'm assuming, at the University of Cambridge. Now there's a reason why you're here, like I said earlier. You have to remind yourself that you're worthy of whatever you put your mind to. And don't let anyone ever tell you that something is impossible. Because nothing's impossible. Nothing. People can say to you, the stats on this, like for example, when I went to America, there was only 4 people in the whole of the USA who got into plastic surgery as an international graduate in the year I applied, and I was one of 4. But I used to review those stats, and I'd be like, I'll never get in. I'm not good enough. What makes me different? What makes me better than the others? Don't let anyone tell you that something's impossible. We're all here for a reason in this particular beautiful library in Cambridge. It's gorgeous. And keep reminding yourself of the wins that you have, and remind that no matter what you put your mind to, you can achieve anything that you want to. So don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise.
Thank you very much.
So,
I will take a couple of questions from the audience. So, yes, please.
Can I ask a few questions?
of course.
Yeah. Talk is very fascinating. So actually, the first question is, it's just like, I think I have been through a very tough, experience. So this kind of from like academia to business. It's just like in the past that I've worked in a project about automating a certain therapy, and the competitor is super powerful. And then it's just like what you have said. Everybody told you could not make it, but I tried so hard, and then I think I did all I can do. But in the end, it seems that the result was not very good. But I'm still in progress. So do you think I need to change my path? Because now everybody is talking about AI, and I'm not sure it's just like hardware or medical therapy. I understand the long term it can be, revolutionary or save a lot of people's life, but it's not like AI where people can publish a lot of papers just maybe within 1 year, 2 years. And if you are going to develop a successful medical therapy or automating or give a mature bio product, it may take years, and the result is not certain. So how did you have any suggestion for my dilemma?
Yeah, it sounds like you've been through a lot.
Yeah.
You've got to. Number one, I think the most important part of that is that you shouldn't let the past and everything that's happened, being in a competitive world, having competitors maybe, cast doubt in your own mind. And even if it didn't work out, listen, failures only make us stronger, right? You shouldn't let the past weigh on your shoulders too much. You've got to just learn from it. And if you've taken away some of those lessons, you've learned from it, and then you're then in a better position to thrive, I feel. Regarding AI, was it producing products or devices, or was it?
Yeah, the past product is about CAR-T therapy. So to actually automating the protocol of CAR-T manufacturing.
For cancer therapy.
Yeah. So try to. I'm not sure. I think the aim of the project is to build a bioreactor that can do all the CAR-T manufacturing process.
Yeah.
I understand CAR-T therapy is still at the very infant stage, and potentially this device can benefit a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But there are just two obstacles. It's just I feel it's very hard to make my product better than my competitors. It's just one of the competitors is Thermo Fisher. I'm not sure whether you know it. It's a giant company, and they have a lot of money. And I'm just a researcher in a lab. I don't have. I use cells just in million numbers, but they use cells in billion number. It's just for their device, one goal is just 10 billion cells, and then I started to question myself whether I need to continue or whether I have a chance. And the second problem now is a lot of people are talking about AI, and then even Nobel Prize were given to some AI researchers. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Am I on the right track?
It sounds like you need. Well, I obviously don't specialize within this particular realm, but I would say it sounds like you probably need to get some form of support or guidance, and maybe speak to other companies, maybe, or some outsiders who can help you through that process, rather than take it all on your own shoulders. Because it sounds like you're doing a lot on your own independently, but maybe you need just the support of others to help you through that this chapter in your life. Because yes, AI is being implemented, and I'm sure there are people in the room who know a lot more about AI, maybe in the conversation afterwards, than I do personally. But it is something that I know a lot of my friends who went into consulting who are doing AI specifically for different types of cancer therapies and developing algorithms that can be used for treatment protocols. I would say you should probably get in with, at least have some support that can help you through this process rather than take it on yourself. Because it sounds like a lot. I would be overwhelmed if I was you too. So maybe reduce the burden of stress and get some help.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Ash. This was very, very insightful.
Thanks so much.
I'm curious, did you have any particular role models growing up, or as you ventured into your entrepreneurship journey? Were there particular people that you were looking up to, and what was the process of choosing those role models for you personally?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Most of my mentors or role models in the industry were mostly academics over the years, and I think that's it's actually quite hard because they don't always understand the entrepreneurship journey associated with medicine, because they are so tunnel visioned within an academic realm. Even if some of them do a little private practice on the side, they almost frown upon people who go into totally private because they think you're selling out, you're not doing what you trained for 20 odd years to do. It's been difficult, to be honest, because I had people who I really looked up to, who I really lost touch with because of the change in my journey and the change in direction that I wanted to go. There were a couple of guys in the past in America who I looked up to, like a couple of different surgeons who would set up a model that were very different to mine, but just respect them from a business perspective. And honestly, the people who I connect with the most now, and my circle in London, are mostly filled with entrepreneurs rather than medics, because I feel like I relate more now to entrepreneurs and people, and they can be in different avenues, right? We've talked about a couple today who are, some are in, well-being, mindfulness, some have, global companies and other things. So it's really interesting though, because I feel like I can relate to them more. So I don't really have any true role models now who I continue from my past, because I felt like my journey changed so much, and the evolution you find people who you used to relate to, you can't actually relate to that much anymore. And it's the same with friendships. A lot of my friendships from medical school changed. And as sad as it was, I think it was just the natural course of it, because you have so much that binds you together. Like when you're all studying together, you have so much that binds you together, and you have to grow together as well and evolve together. And I think we all have very different goals. So it's a really great question. I think if you can find people that you can just trust and you can voice things to and have that sort of support, I think that's really helpful to do and cultivate. And I'm sure your circles and the business school here and everything probably have amazing people that you guys can all go to. I just didn't feel like I had much of that in an academic setting growing up in a surgical environment. It was just very different. But it's a great question.
Any other questions? So we have, let's start from there. I will bring him up, I like.
Thank you very much for the talk. At one point you said that you wouldn't feel comfortable in yourself if your business began to plateau at this point. So my question is, do you think there will ever come a point which you would be happy even if it plateaued? In a sense, will it ever be enough?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm sure they'll reach. I don't know what but it's the same when you define success, right? When people define what is success to you or what makes you feel successful, I'm not sure at what point people reach where they're like, you know what, this is enough. I don't think I'm. It's not even chasing a number. There's no, like I said, I've already what I thought I could do in 10 years. In the next 10 years, you know, I did in probably 2. So I wasn't expecting for it to go this way. So I could easily say, if I plateaued now and everything just continued to stay the same, of course I'd be happy. But I think just the type of person that I am personally, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, is that they're constantly looking for new ways to evolve and different things. And I'm constantly doing things on the outside of my business, whether it's doing things within the skincare world, doing global talks to them, or whether it's different pieces of additional, not only, it's not even just revenue, but it's actually also interest and academic stimulation. I still give a lot of talks at conferences and things. So even if you lose, you mentioned the academic to out of academic, but I think you're always an academic deep down, no matter what you do. But it's a great question. You could continually be chasing a number, but for me, and that's the reason why I'm not trying to scale as well internationally right now, and all the things that we've mentioned, is because if it was only about a number, and it was only about revenue, or it was about what I could potentially do, you could just, there's no limit. You could keep going and keep going. And the reason why this year I reined it in a little bit is because I wanted to try and strike a bit more of a balance, but still obviously continue to grow. I think the plateauing element is more just me as a human. It's the same with whether I commit to a gym program or I commit to waking up or whatever. I'm very, very disciplined in my life, and I feel like if I just felt like things were just constantly at this level, it just wouldn't excite me more than it be, I've got to reach this number, otherwise I won't be happy. So it's a great question. I think a lot of people struggle with it, and you see a lot of entrepreneurs constantly chasing something that may be unattainable, or maybe one day attainable, but they spend their whole life stressed and burdened and working 1 million hours a week, and it's just not. Again, I think it's just finding the balance that works for you. I'm not telling people not to work 7 days a week. I'm just saying find the balance that works for you and factor in the well-being element of it in your life too. But I love that question. It's great.
We have 2 more questions, and then people will also have an opportunity to ask questions privately.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for your talk.
Thanks.
I had 2 questions regarding your branding strategies. So first of all, I wanted to ask whether you had a large social media following before you started your business, and second question would be, what do you think would be the most effective strategy for branding in the medical field?
Yeah, so some great questions. So I didn't have a massive social media following before. I did a little profile when I was in residency training, and then I took that down for 2 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and took everything off, all the posts off and everything. So I think out of that, I still continued that profile, but I lost a lot of following from that. So I didn't start with a lot. I don't think I'm classified as someone who has, some of the people who've been here have had like 1 million plus followers. I do not have anything like that. I think I think social media and Instagram and now TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. I don't think I'm cool enough to be on it necessarily. A lot of you probably are. There's a lot of ways now. I don't think that would necessarily generate business for me, but Instagram does generate business from me. I use Instagram more as a portfolio. That's completely by design. Does that create enough traction? No, I could definitely create more traction by doing more content. I think you've got to, if you want to play it smart in this world now, especially on social media or Instagram, you need to be producing, engaging videos with captions effectively and talking about things that are topical. That would generate traction, that would generate a following. Honestly, it's just getting enough hours in a day. I keep saying it every month, but I'm going to do it, and I will commit to this. And you'll see on my profile, if any of you follow me, like there will be some more videos coming out on, because I talk about in the media all the time, and what I say to them, I could easily just put down on my profile and use it. So I think you've got to create engaging content for sure. From a branding perspective, you've got to really figure out like what realm you're in within it, and what kind of demographic and what kind of patients you're trying to attract. For me, it was very much of creating a luxury brand within the industry. I'm not here to appeal to every patient. I'm not going to get every patient through my door because that's not what my business is structured for. But as a plastic surgeon, I made a very conscious decision, which was slightly risky at the beginning, which was I'm not going to charge people a low procedure fee to do a treatment. For example, somebody could go down the road and get Botox for a quarter of the price that they would with me. Are they going to go to a plastic surgeon? No, they're not. They're going to go to a beautician or somebody who's not medically trained. But I had to be very conscious about setting up a business that didn't undersell me and undersell my worth. And that comes down to like me talking about, we have to all figure out what our worth is. So you've got to figure out what it is. I wanted to create a very luxury brand, which was, it's not necessarily attainable to everybody to come to me. I have people who save up to see me, and that I'm humbled by that. So I have people of different demographics. It's not people just with a lot of disposable income, but my branding reflects that luxury brand that I'm trying to create, rather than it just be seen as a clinic. And a lot of people approach it as though, whether you set up a hospital, you set up a clinic, you set up, whatever it is, they just do it based on that particular premises or business, rather than creating a whole experience. For me, it's about the experience that I'm trying to create. From the minute people walk into my London clinic, for example, in the hotel, they get complimentary spa access, they get to go to the pool before they see me, it's all, so I wanted to create a different type of experience that is outside of the box. Yes, I could rent a room on Harley Street for less than a quarter of the price that I pay. But for me, it wasn't about that. It was about creating something that's different, and you need to shine in whatever way you want to shine and bring in the people that you want to bring in. So you've got to think long and hard about, firstly, the type of people you're trying to cater to in medicine or the field that you're in, and then number two, the type of aesthetic that you want to put out, because every single detail is a reflection of you and your business. So it's very well thought out for me.
So we'll take one more question.
Thank you for the talk. I'm curious, so for the first months or days when you started your business, before your brand was established and well known, how did you find your clients, and how was this experience different from the business you're running today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did a really old-fashioned way of door knocking at the beginning. No joke, and no clinics do this, because in this day everyone's all social media, sending DMs to everyone. So it was in the middle of 2 lockdowns, and as you can imagine, it was quite difficult to socially engage and be charismatic when you're wearing a mask and you can't really animate in the way that we're talking to each other now. But I went from door to door in all the local towns in the county that I set up. So I set up in Surrey, right? Some of you know that is down southeast of England. So I went to all the local towns and I basically door knocked on all the businesses. And as awkward as it was, I love talking, you can probably tell. I don't have an issue chatting, but it's still awkward because you're going into a business where no one knows you and you're trying to start up a conversation and say what you're going to do and that you're a new business in town. And some people are really dismissive, which makes you feel more awkward. And some people are really lovely. And I basically just started spreading the word locally. And then when lockdowns hit, I started doing Zoom calls with all these local businesses, loads of different types of businesses, florists, photographers, it doesn't matter. I was just trying to get Zoom calls set up because we couldn't meet at a cafe then and go for coffee, which I would do now. And just by getting a buzz in the local community, people started to talk. And they were like, oh my goodness, there's a plastic surgeon who's coming here, he's going to be doing aesthetics, it's amazing, we don't have anything like it in our town. And I set up in a suburb where there was nothing like me in the town. And it was also a town and a county where there's a lot of affluence. So I studied all the demographic data of all the points the places that I was thinking about setting up. And so it was a very strategic decision why I set up there and why my clinic now in Ascot is in Ascot. It's because it's an amazing suburb with very little around like me. And that's why I'm saying you've got to find whatever niche. And so for me, I did the old-fashioned method of knocking on those doors, doing those virtual Zoom calls when I couldn't knock on the doors, and getting to know people. And a lot of the business then became word of mouth, because the minute people started coming in and getting treatments and they were happy, they would then tell all their friends, and all their friends would come, and then all of their friends would come, and then it was just a never-ending snowball effect. And the beauty of my business, being in aesthetics, is that if people get Botox with me, they've got to come back every 3 months to get it done, right? So like it's a constant revenue stream. So if people are happy and you make them feel amazing when they walk into the clinic, they will keep coming back, and all their friends will come back. And then you get these, and now I treat people from Hollywood. I have A-list celebrities, I have people in the media, I treat beauty directors in this country, I treat beauty directors internationally. I have people flying in all over the world now every week to see me in clinic, from America to the UAE to Europe. And it's super humbling for me because, as you can imagine, I started in this really small room in Surrey, minimizing my overhead, not having staff, to now having people fly globally to come get treatments. It's very heartwarming to me, and I really don't take it for granted. But the old-fashioned methods sometimes work the best, and that's why the human connections and letting your personality shine is sometimes the best. That is better than sometimes than other methods, because yes, I do use Instagram and I do use emails, and I send, even to try and get into the press at the beginning, I would send people messages, and most of those messages aren't even read, they don't care. They're like, we have enough people to go to, why should we pick you as the doctor? And now, funnily enough, all those people who I messaged back in the day, from British Vogue to Forbes, whatever, who never read my messages, they're now all my patients. And I never had the heart to tell them that I sent them a message and they never read it, because as soon as they started to follow me on Instagram, I quickly unsent the message from 3 years ago, talking about who I was, because I was so petrified that they would realize that I was like the guy who sent them this message 3 years ago that they never even acknowledged. But it's just funny how the world works. So I would use all of these platforms in different ways. And listen, some messages are going to get picked up, some are not. But I think the key is just that connection and that continuity. I like check in on people, even if and people don't do that. They don't. I really care about the patient experience and the customer experience, and I think you've got to do that no matter what you set up, because it shows you care, and people then want to talk about you even more. And so it's just building that relationship. So I think that was it. And another business, and just on that final point, another strategy I had was I take more time with patients who come in to see me. So I take 1 hour for a consultation, which, by the way, just on average, most London providers would take 15 to 20 minutes with a new patient. But the reason why I take an hour is not because I have an hour free. It's because I want to build a relationship with somebody who is sitting across from me, and they feel like they get to know me, and that trust is built. Because if you build that relationship, that is how word of mouth will spread. Because if you are doing something that's different and you are creating a totally unique experience for somebody when normally they're rushed in and out like a GP practice, which is how most are run, it's a different experience. Yes, it eats into my time in a day. Yes, I have to work longer days as a consequence, but it builds that relationship, and that relationship will pay off. So it's just caring about what you do, I guess, and being passionate. But it's a great question. You've really got to think long and hard about how you strategize at the beginning. And a lot of it you can do, you don't always need to outsource everything. You can do it yourself, and sometimes paid advertisements, people see right through that stuff now. If you do paid editorials, people read it, and they see it's an editorial feature, and it doesn't seem as organic to people, so they don't always do it. So you've got to be careful about what you're doing as paid or sponsored posts, and things that you are not, because I see people making that mistake a lot in different businesses.
Thank you everyone for all your questions. Thank you very much for coming. I'm also very grateful for Jesus College for the opportunity to have the event in this beautiful place of Web Library. Thank you very much, Ash, for this very informative conversation. We covered so much, and it was such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for listening to all of that for an hour. It's a lot of time. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Everyone is really welcomed to stay and have a little chat if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.